Welcome to the Well Worship Man podcast, where men come to build unshakable presence, become the rock in their relationships, and shape a legacy that lasts beyond their years. Here, we explore the path to mature masculinity through humble power, daily devotion, and unwavering integrity.
Today we have Lair Torrent on the podcast. Lair is a licensed psychotherapist, best-selling author, and sought-after speaker who bridges Eastern wisdom with Western psychology to offer practical, transformative tools for personal and professional growth. Known for his compelling storytelling and disarming humor, Lair helps audiences and clients alike unlock deeper relationships with others, themselves, and their work. He's the author of The Practice of Love and the best-selling course, Speaking Your Truth in Relationships. His insights have been featured in NPR, The New York Times, Rolling Stone, and Inc.com, and he co-hosts a podcast called The Practice of Love. From executives and sales teams to artists and family-run businesses, Lair coaches individuals and organizations in cultivating connection, integrity, and emotional fluency. His core belief: it is relationship that gives our lives meaning, relationship to others, to ourselves, and to the work we do. Welcome, Lair.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, happy to have you on. So, Lair, we talked a bit leading up to this conversation. And I know that you've been married for over 20 years. You have children. You're living a life of freedom in Costa Rica, and you understand relationship to ourselves, to others, and to work is really the core of life. Talk to us a little bit about what life was like before you understood that.
Well, it was kind of a mess, to be perfectly honest with you. I was purposeless. Um, I was living a life of exterior validation where I was constantly outsourcing my self-worth to expectation of society, of people around me, of my ego, really, probably more to the point, to my wounding, to the kind of, I don't know, can we swear on here? Do we swear on here or no?
Yeah.
To shitty parenting. Yeah. So yeah, I was living in New York City. I was a bartender most of the time. I was an actor a good bit of the time, and I was pursuing a career in acting, not necessarily because I loved theater so much, or being an actor in film or TV, which I got to do a good bit of that. It was because I was trying to fill a void that lived somewhere around my chest center, with, again, that external validation. I figured if I could get famous enough, rich enough, and people liked me enough, then I would suddenly feel like I was enough. And as it turned out, all of that was kind of a sucker's bet.
I was talking to someone recently about, this process of external validation and just making their decisions based on, what other people are going to think. And it seems that that process of just teasing out what's my voice and what's
Mhm.
someone else's voice and where do I want to make that decision from is
Mhm.
quite challenging. At the phase that you're talking about, we don't even necessarily know there's a difference. We just know that the voice of someone else, when it's good, feels good, and when it's
Sure.
not good, it doesn't feel good. And so I'm wondering about, your process of stepping out of that
Mhm.
place,
Mhm.
and how do you go through that path of, okay, I want to start living from my voice now. I want to start living from what feels good to me
Yeah.
instead of what other people tell me should feel good.
That was a really hard one for me because, again, my ego was steeped in it. And again, would I finally get the love of my father and the people around me if I got famous enough, wealthy enough, right? And so there was the pursuit of this. So really, it wasn't necessarily teasing out the voice. I think that sort of happened as it did. And I'll tell you a funny story about the voice finally going, here it is. It was about getting right with myself. And it was about going into silence daily, doing the thing that most people don't want to do, which is going into stillness, right? Because stillness scares the shit out of most people. What are you going to find in there? It was Joseph Campbell, the cave you need to go in. You don't want to go in. I know I butchered it, but that's sort of the gist of it. Yeah. And so I went in that cave every day. Every day I went in that cave, and every day I was reading something that was, thought provoking, um, soul enhancing. And as I did that, I was sort of like chipping away at this block, right? And I was sort of unbeknownst to me, before I knew it, there was a sculpture there, and it looked remarkably like me. And so there I was on the set of Law and Order. I've told this story 1,000 times, but I'll tell it again. I'm on the set of Law and Order. I can't remember if it was SVU or the regular one, because I did both. But I'm in my trailer, right? And I had just been to Hair and Makeup, where I had been talking to Mariska Hargitay, and I had a movie that we had just done, and I had a play that I was about ready to go into, and I had done a pilot for ABC. So I was feeling all about myself, right? Like all of my ego stuff was just getting pinged. Like, yeah, just eating it up. And I'm sitting in that trailer, and it was like a voice came inside of my head. It was like, you can keep doing this. You can keep banging your head against that wall, or you can do what you know you need to do. Right. This is a big ego trip. You're not telling stories because you love telling stories. That's not what you're doing. You're feeding that monster, and you can keep doing it. And we're going to go along on the trip with you, because that's what we do. Or you can get right with yourself. And I knew right then, I was like, okay, so 8 years of school, fun. That's an inconvenient truth. But I was looking for more validation that this was actually the road that I was supposed to take. And I was reading this book. It's called Wishcraft by Barbara Sher. It's a really good old book. I don't know anyone else who's read it, but I loved that book. And in it, she said, if you want to know what you're supposed to do with your life, what your purpose is, look at your bookshelf. Right? She said, it might not be on the spines, but it'll be in the pages, because this is the place you go when no one's paying you. This is what you do when no one's looking, when you want to do the thing you want to do. It's in those pages. Well, I looked at my bookshelf, and there was like 6 books on acting, and there was about 60 books on self-help, on how the brain works, therapy, how to be a better person. And so I was like, okay, it's time. And so, that's how I sort of chipped that away, that I chipped that block away over time, sort of unbeknownst to me. And again, that thing that I finally was staring at did look remarkably like self.
Mm. I was just, before you ask your question, wondering if this moment of, okay, you can do what you're doing or what you're supposed to do, was that, when you were already taking moments of silence to yourself? Like there
Yeah.
was a bit of a process before
Oh yeah.
actually having some
Years.
clarity. Yeah. Okay,
Years.
great.
Well, the clarity was there, right? Like I always say this, your soul is knocking at your door. It's tapping on the window,
Yeah.
and life is speaking to you. You're just not listening. It's there. It's always there. It's always like, hey, over here. Right.
Yeah.
And then what happens is those little pebbles become bigger rocks. And then before you know it, you sort of look out the window and you see that there are flaming boulders being hurled at your house. Right. We call it karma, right? Just these series of terrible decisions. And so the Lakota Sioux, they have this metaphor: red road, black road, right? And the black road is the road of ego, right? It's the road of all sorts of bad choices. The red road is soul, is spirit. I did this journey, this meditative journey at the beginning of school, and they took us into this cave, and you meet the old man, and the old man has a gift for you, kind of one of those deals, right? It's just a sort of cliches, but it works. It's crazy how those things are kind of cool too, and they work. And so there's this guy in there, out of central casting, old wise man, long beard, in this cave, and he hands me a walking stick, and at the top of it, there's the top was sort of chopped off, and there is what looked like this squiggly Y on it, right? And I in the journey, I asked him, I said, "What is that? Why is there a Y on there?" He's like, "It's not a Y, it's a map." And so that squiggly Y goes like this, right? And he's like, "You're here. You're supposed to be here, and the distance between these 2 points is going to be your suffering." Yeah. And so, yeah.
Yeah. And the longer we stay on that other path, the farther we get from the right path, and the tougher the journey back to that other path becomes.
That's
It's like
correct.
There's a story of share a story for your story. There's they say it comes from Japan. Who knows where it comes from? But when you get on the wrong train, get
Mm,
off at the next stop because the longer you stay on, the more expensive the return trip will be.
Hmm.
that's right.
And you had this moment of, okay, I could choose the black path or I could choose the red path.
Mm,
And the ego will go along if I choose the black path, if I continue down this path of getting external validation and these cheap hits of dopamine, the ego will come along because we'll do that and I'll feel good some of the time. Or I could go down this path that I've never been on before, that
mhm.
really nothing is promised to me. I have a question for you about men as a whole, but how did you make that decision to step onto the path of really getting to know yourself without the promise that it would be fruitful or better than this egoic path that you were on?
Well, I think it was faith and alignment. I felt so out of alignment that I had to put my faith in the idea that this was bringing me back to some sense of alignment, and that I was getting those whispers of when I do this work on myself, and not yet with others, but like there's some sense of alignment that's happening within me. That something's speaking from not here but here. Something's coming through my heart center. There's authenticity coming through me. Whereas before I'm play acting at this life that I think I should be having, rather than actually living the life that I know I was being in those books, right? And in the pages of those journals and those in that silence and that solitude that I was taking those days. I woke up, or I didn't wake up. It was like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. I was 19 years old. And this is going to sound silly, but I'm watching infomercials because back then, I'm dating myself now. Back then, there was only infomercials on that late, right? And it was Tony Robbins. It was Tony Robbins. I mean, you know, and so I bombed into my mom's room at, 3 o'clock in the morning. I said, I need your credit card. She goes, what for? I said, I'll pay you back. I promise. Pay you back. Right. And so I bought it. I bought this the tape set. And that was the beginning of, it was like the kernel of self-awareness
Hmm.
and bringing me to bigger questions and deeper questions that took me to the next level of of insight and exploration. That was the beginning of it. But the promise for me felt like alignment. And there was a truth in there for me. There was a promise in there somewhere. I could feel my soul making me a promise that if you do this, and it was such a slight whisper, so quiet that often I didn't believe it. And I would go
Mhm.
back to the ego, and I would go back to the thing that I knew was a fickle lover at best. And finally, I was like, you know what? I need to be all in on this relationship to myself and have both feet in the boat for myself. And that's what I did.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So this decision really emerged from within, this decision to partner with your soul.
Mhm.
I'm wondering if it must emerge from within as an independent process, or if there's a way that we can talk to men in a
Mhm.
way that will encourage them to start exploring that red path.
Well, there is. I think that external conversation comes from perhaps, if I may be so bold, perhaps men like myself, men like yourself, people who have walked some of that path yourself. And what you've come to understand is my emotions, they're not the enemy.
Hmm.
And that there is a far larger window of emotionality available to us than anger and rage and some sort of collapse into what looks to be vulnerability, which scares the shit out of us, right?
Mm.
Um, can we allow ourselves that space? Can we demand it of ourselves? And um, can we, know that there are going to be people around us who don't really understand it? Um, but that's because I was raised in a house full of women. I was raised by 5 really powerful women. And so I wasn't afraid of my emotions. I mean, and I don't mean to paint with broad gender strokes, but the fact of the matter is I think women tend to have a far broader emotional vocabulary and often, not always, but often a willingness to go there that we don't. I think that's why women live longer than we do.
Huh.
Um, because you're off gassing all of that stress that we just sort of keep and then have heart attacks and stroke later and wonder why. It's got to be the booze and the eating. Um, Sure, that's some of it. But yeah, I think not being afraid of our emotions. We've
Mhm.
pathologized our emotions by and large in this culture. And so I will do anything, all manner of fuckery to not feel what I feel. And that's an epidemic that's plaguing us. And so this is where we see addiction at every level, whether it be pornography, drugs, alcohol, gaming, gambling, cheating, you name it, anything to not feel what I'm feeling. The difference between myself in that moment and most men is, and I'm not going to tell you that I didn't do some drinking because I did, too much. But I had to write myself with that and go, yeah, what am I bypassing with this? It was feelings.
I love this question because there is part of the problem or the challenge with crossing that barrier is initially you don't really know that you're blocking your emotions,
Mm-hmm.
Like there
Mm-hmm.
isn't so much consciousness that I'm drinking because I don't want to feel my shame, or
Right.
I'm scrolling because I don't want to feel my anxiety or whatever it is. Or
Mm-hmm.
actually, at this phase of the collective healing, everyone kind of knows they have anxiety, but
Mm-hmm.
the acceptance of it just makes it okay instead of something to work with.
Sure. Right.
But there is this other way that it comes out verbally, I've noticed, where it's not I don't have feelings, but it's I'm not doing anything wrong. There's this block of in a lot of healing lineages, you have to admit that there's an issue to even be able to solve it. You can't change something if you're not willing to admit that there's something changeable about it. And so it's not just coming out saying, I have these emotions, but actually saying I can be doing better. And
Mm-hmm.
that is challenging for anyone, but there, in the way that the ego seems to present in the masculine, that seems to be really a hard thing to admit, is that I could be showing up in my relationship better. I could be showing up to life better, for myself better, in my job better.
Mm-hmm.
There is kind of this verbiage of my relationship's fine, my job's fine, my life is fine. I don't really know what I would get help for. And that is a similar, like, how do we bridge that gap between, I guess for some people, they just have to get to the point where the problem is forced to them,
Yeah.
but
I'm
I'm
going to bounce
always
off the
kind of
bottom.
searching. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm always kind of searching for this way of, can we get to a place where people don't have to reach their rock bottom, where maybe someone can be guided to understand, actually, we can all be doing better? So how do we change that narrative of, like, it would stop people are doing things bad, but we can all be doing things better?
Yeah, so this is going to be sort of a convoluted answer, but this is my
Great.
answer to it. So when couples come in to my office, I say we're essentially looking for four things and four things only. There's the
Mm.
stuff you're fighting about on the surface, right? Money, kids, sex, whatever the fuck it is. And underneath the surface, you're fighting about something else. You're actually fighting for something different than the money, the sex. These are the things you're fighting about. The things you're fighting for are under the surface. It's Carl Rogers, who's the first humanist therapist. He sort of dovetailed off of Jung and Freud and said, hey, guess what, guys? Emotion is probably really important. He said, all you therapists, every client that comes to the door is looking for one thing and one thing only, and that's this thing called unconditional positive regard. And I was like, oh, that sounds cool. What the fuck is that? Unconditional. That sounds right, but what is it? And so when I was researching my book, I wanted to kind of unpack what that is, right? And so for me, I came up with four things, and I didn't come up with my research to everybody else and got a consensus. Some people had this, some people said it was that. And so I said it was this. It's, am I loved? Am I safe? Am I enough? And do I matter? Am I loved? Am I safe? Am I enough? And do I matter? And from my perspective and from various forms of therapy, we come through the gates of life and that baby's looking at you and it's asking a lot of questions, not the least of which is, am I going to be loved? Am I going to be safe? Am I going to be enough? And will I matter to someone in this world? And we keep asking that question, right? From to our parents, to our families, to our extended families, to our communities at large as we go through the formative years of our lives. And if any one of those questions is not answered in the affirmative, and I said this answer would be convoluted, so here it is, we get a wound, we get a core wound, right? And very often, again, I'm not painting with broad gender strokes, but the women who come into my practice will go, I know mine, and it's all of those, or they'll name, I wasn't loved. And invariably they'll look at the partner, the one that looks remarkably like the one next to you, and will say, and I don't know what his is. Could you tell me what his is? I don't know what his is. Right. And I'll say, yeah, no, I know what it is. And he's like, how the fuck do you know what it is? I haven't even said a word yet. And I'm like, you're not enough.
Hmm.
Right.
Hmm.
You've never been enough. You're never enough. Chris Rock said in one of his specials, and I'm not necessarily saying I ascribe to this, but this is what he said. And every time I say it, men go, He says, unconditional love is left for women, children, and dogs. We as men are loved for what we can provide. Now, I'm not saying that's true. I'm saying that's how it feels to many, many men. So the answer to your question is, I have to confront the fact that I've never, ever been enough, that the pile of money is never enough. The car's not nice enough. Have you heard the 666 rule yet? I told you about this one.
Please
Have you heard
tell
this one?
me.
Yeah. No, so there's this thing out there. It's on Instagram and all the horseshit places, but it says 666, right? Men have to make 6 figures, be over 6 feet tall, and your dick has to be at least 6 inches long.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
Interesting, right? I mean, horrifying to a large degree.
And 2 of those things you can't do anything about.
Right.
Right. That's a great point. So to that point, like, we have to confront our not enoughness. And that, going back to the beginning of our conversation, was exactly what I was confronting. As I chose to not be an actor. I remember the thing I said to my therapist at the time. She's like, I think you have a gift for being a therapist. I think maybe you should look at that. And I said, but who would know I'm any good at my job except for me and the client I'm sitting with? And she was like, well, why isn't that enough? I was like, because I'm not enough. I need everybody else to see it, to validate the fact that I'm enough. And so who wants to confront that? Who willingly wants to confront that? I have to like sneak it in. I'm like therapeutically roofing these men in my practice, right? No, it's not that. We're not going to cover that at all. No, let's just talk about the gym or your job where you're not enough.
I'm having this connect the dots experience in my mind that I think is really important to share. So I went home and visited my family recently, and I do a lot of just like, I like to talk about this stuff. So pretty much whoever I'm hanging out with, this is what I'm talking about. And
Lucky
so it's been
them.
a little, yeah. I don't know if they think so, but
You
I
do find out who your people are. Sorry. You do find out who your people are. Yeah.
for sure.
So go ahead. Sorry.
But I've been like seeding some of this work to my parents for a long time, and they're really great. They're like so open to things that I share with them. But I had this awareness come through this weekend of just like, man, I actually don't know if some of what I'm sharing is supportive because maybe it's making them feel like they're not doing enough. And that can be like really weighted. I was listening to something from a mentor also in the past week where she was like, I just want to be someone who takes a stone away, not someone who's adding stones for people's backpack. And as you're talking, I'm realizing that one of the dynamics that plays out a lot in relationships is women who've done the work. Some of it, we're all work in progress, but, and men who haven't, and then the women are, like, really trying to get the men to come on board, and I'm realizing as you're talking that the mirror is very much like, "Oh, yeah, I've accessed all of this self-love, and I really care about myself, but obviously, I don't love that piece of me that hadn't done the work yet, or I wouldn't be, like, forcing the people around me to do the work." And yeah, so thanks for that key because I feel like that really puts into perspective like, oh, these past versions of me that weren't doing the work, they also were worthy of love. And I'm not just worthy of it now because I've kind of gotten my shit together. And that feels really important for as, this can play out in like the male, like men who have done the work being with female partners is just not necessarily the pattern that I've seen. But I think that's important for like the female listeners to hear of like, okay, if you're getting down on the men in your partnership for not who are not doing the work you think they should do instead of, supporting them following their path, then maybe there
Right.
is a piece of you that wasn't doing the work years ago that needs more love. And
Sure.
also from the masculine side, like understanding that anything that is being projected onto you by a partner isn't really about you. Like, yeah, there's
Mhm.
probably some growth that you could be had, and maybe she has some wisdom that you could be listening to, but dissecting out, for everyone, like what's a projection and what's actually the worth that we do or don't feel, and what's the worth that we don't feel that we're saying is like not worthy about the person sitting across from us.
Mhm. Yeah, teasing that out can be really difficult. And, it takes that self-reflection to understand the difference. I
Mhm.
do say, however, if your partner is saying, "I think we need to go to therapy," then we probably do. You
For
know,
sure.
it's not an argument. And I mean, I get people being dragged into therapy, which, I kind of don't do. Um, but if your partner's saying that there's a problem and this is a person that you've put your heart and soul into and you're trusted to and decided to make a life with, but you don't trust them to make that assessment, then what are you doing?
Yeah.
Did you choose
Mhm.
well? Maybe you didn't.
Mhm.
Um, one of the times that made my relationship, um, it like up leveled my relationship to the next level for sure, was the day that I realized is that very often she's the smartest person in the room, right? Like she's the smartest fucking person in the room. She is, like, cause I can't see the forest for the trees on my own shit a lot of the time. And I've gotten in the boat with this one, right? And so I'm like, probably need to trust her counsel. If she's saying there's some shit I need to own here, I probably need to own it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. And if you're not able to do that, you're not really in a partnership. I don't know what it is, but you're not partners, because partners call each other out and listen to each other and decide that you're not the issue, this is the issue here, and we're going to work on it together. I want to double back to this core wound of not enoughness in men, because it is a fuel, not feeling like enough. And for a
Hmm.
lot of guys, they achieve incredible things with that fuel, albeit a toxic one. And so some guys, consciously or unconsciously, won't approach the work because they're afraid that if I heal this belief of I'm not enough, I'm going to
Hmm.
lose my edge. If I
Yeah.
feel like it's enough,
Mhm.
if I feel content and satisfied, am I going to
God
lose
forbid.
all my motivation, all my drive to build as the masculine? So what do we tell those guys?
Well, there is a massive redefinition of what's important, and there's a massive redefinition of what purpose looks like.
Mhm.
And yeah, you're asking them to brave that. That to some degree, will you be less than from a certain perspective, maybe because you're not out kicking ass, or maybe you're not making the same number of zeros, but maybe you are. Maybe you're making more, is what I'll say. Maybe you're doing way better. Maybe you have more time for your family. I saw one of these guys. He's like one of these, hard charging. He and his wife, I don't even know his name, and nor do I want to repeat it because he's a puke, but they're on there like just absolutely yelling at a room full of men who've probably paid $18,000 for the weekend for them just to bitch at him. And he's all jacked up and
Mm.
tan as shit. And his whole thing was, you need 20 minutes a day with your kids, and that's it. Their kids don't need any more than that. That's what he said. 20 minutes.
Oh my god, that's crazy.
Why did you have them? You dumbass, right? Like this is the stuff that's being spewed to keep men on that treadmill of you are not enough, because you're never going to be ripped as that guy. And you're never going to have I mean, how many, I said to a guy who I work with the other day, I'm like, how many, you have 3 planes, 3, you can only fly one at a time. And we went through the process of selling his company recently,
Mhm.
and, untold millions, I mean, like his kids will never have to work. And, I've gotten him into the work. And it was the session after the sale of the company. And he turns to me and he goes, well, what now, Lair? And I'm like, exactly, exactly, because he's found out that like it's great and the toys are fun, but it's not everything. Hmm. I'm not sure I answered your question, but
Yeah, I guess to tie that up, if not enoughness is the toxic fuel, what
mhm.
is the potential renewable, clean energy source as the alternative?
Oh man, it's integration of those parts that, because I was never enough, that no one ever clapped for,
Hmm.
right? Those parts of me that I couldn't stand looking at, that I felt shame about, that,
Um,
owning that, being present with that. And, not to sound, some people will be like, oh, the answer is always love. The answer is always love. The answer is always love. It's self-love. It's
Word.
loving your partner, loving your kids. Because you don't give a shit about any of that stuff when you're dying. You really don't. I mean, unless you're a total psychopath.
I think even those people at the end of their life, like there's a moment of like, oh no, I
Right.
have to come back and clear all this karma.
Yeah. Yeah. We're doing it again.
These types of experiences that you're talking about this guy is giving, there is also like an addictive nature to them. It's like you
Mm-hmm.
go and this person who's really cruel eventually tells you you're doing a good job, and then you go home and you use all this toxic fuel of not enoughness and shame, and then, oh no, I'm like right back to the start. And it really creates this, people aren't really saying this much because addictions are only bad if it's like a
Mm-hmm.
substance or a porn addiction or gambling,
Mm-hmm.
something that's like really negatively impacting your life. But it's like
Mm-hmm.
we can really be addictive to the growth experience.
Sure.
And it's an ever evolving process. So it really is a commitment as like life's work to be on it. But there's much of a difference between what you're talking about, this integration of all of these different pieces of me, and I get to love all of these parts of me no matter when they show up or how, versus I'm going to go to this experience that's really intense over the weekend and I'm going to feel awesome. And then in 6 months, I have to go do another one because I didn't do anything between
Yeah.
those two things. And now I don't feel good again.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm wondering, what's the difference between work that is sustainable and actually moves the needle to start creating love as the fuel
Mm-hmm.
versus work that's like work and personal growth for the sake of trend and doing it?
Yeah. So I always, first of all, like, being addicted to the things we're talking about, like attainment and external validation and all of that, it's like being addicted to food. You know, it's easier, I think, to deal with. Like, okay, drugs. I just won't bring any wine home to the house, and that'll be really helpful. But
Mhm,
I need to eat, so I'm kind of around the thing that I'm addicted to all the time. And we
mhm,
need to attain things. We need to make money. Money kind of makes the world go round, and all of those good things. To your point, like what's sustainable? And I get all these people who go, I'm doing an ayahuasca retreat down in Costa Rica, and I'm like, watch, because the same asshole that walked in that jungle is going to be the same asshole that walked out, right? Because it that experience, while wonderful in all the ways that those things can be, I think for some people, it has to stand on the shoulders of something.
mhm,
It has to stand on the shoulders of making your life a practice, right? Your life needs to be a practice. I said that the reason I called my book The Practice of Love is because I believe love should be a practice. It should be something that you want to do well.
right,
And so you have all these people out on the golf course practicing their golf swings because they want to make sure they're not going to hit a slice uh, in the skins game, but they don't give a shit how they're performing at home with their kids and their wife or their partner, right? So we'll practice a backside turn in surfing or your backhand in tennis, but you're not going to practice how to love yourself and your partner better.
mhm,
That's antithetical to me. These are the most important relationships of your life, and we're pissing them away because of familiarity, because it's easy, and because society says we should be reaching for that. And so your life needs to be a practice. My life's a practice. I want to do it well. I wake up every morning and I'm reading something. I'm considering something. I think that um, there's there are fewer things that are more tragic in life than an unprocessed life, than an unanalyzed human. And we need to be looking at ourselves and asking ourselves that question, like, what have I left on the table? What parts of me do I still don't clap for? What parts of me don't feel loved? Where am I needing to find empathy where I don't have it? These are the elements of a practice life, um, which, by the way, is going to be the name of my next book. Uh,
Mm.
nice.
yeah,
Slide the
yeah.
subtle announcement in there.
Right, right, right.
I love the word practice. I've been teaching yoga for over 5 years, and one of my favorite things about it is it's
Hmm.
a yoga practice.
Yep.
It's not a performance, it's not a contest, it's not a
Love
competition,
that.
it's a practice. And something that I
Hmm.
share with my students is that the promise of practice is progress. There are very few things in life that are promised, but the promise of practice is progress. If you show up consistently with a
Hmm.
certain depth of attention and
Hmm.
intention, you will improve. It's not
That's
going to
right.
be a linear up and to the right motion, but if you graph the scatter plot over time, you're going to see that up and to the right trajectory. And so, to the guys that I work with, the biggest gift that I can give them is not a 6 month container. It's
Hmm.
putting them on a trajectory or helping them put themselves on a trajectory that is self-compelling, that they
Hmm.
taste some of the fruits of this
Hmm.
work so that
Hmm.
when I remove my scaffolding, they're inspired and motivated to continue doing it themselves. And if I don't do that, I've failed them. So this frame of understanding it as a journey, as a process and not a destination. It's cliche, but it is entirely mandatory for
Hmm.
us to continue to experience a wider breadth of life.
I think that's right. And I love using yoga as sort of a template for the experience of practice, right? That if, so when I have a person who's experienced yoga at any level, it's a really great way for me to sort of bring home a lot of points. Like I'll say to them, so what poses are particularly difficult for you? Like for me, hip openers, right? But what happens when you go to the hip opener? You're like, oh, my brain goes, oh shit, here we go. Right? I don't know if I want to do this today. And then, you have that yoga teacher going, okay, let's breathe into it. Let's just notice what's coming up for you. Notice where your mind wants to go as we're in this pose. And, where does it want to go? It goes, let's get out of here. Let's not do this anymore. Right. And what happens when you breathe into it, when you give yourself a little spaciousness and a little time in that place that seems so difficult,
Mhm.
there's an opening, right? It's such an amazing metaphor for how we can move through the practice of life and through the different trials and tribulations of our lives. If we can bring presence and some practice to it, then there's always an opening and we find relief in that. So I love
Yeah,
using yoga as a template.
it's a great microcosm of practice
Mhm,
and all the
mhm,
other areas of our life. Because, like you said, when we're sitting in that pigeon pose or sitting in that hip opener and it's intense, the previous program is to distract, is to think about what I'm eating after this or to
mhm,
take
mhm,
myself out of this experience. And so the guidance in yoga is instead of running from that perceived fire, can you run towards it and not grip and squeeze and fight, but when you're standing in it, can you focus on your breath? Can you slow it down? Can you teach your nervous system some semblance of safety so
mhm,
that you don't need to hit an eject button? And you're exactly right. It's the same muscle of I'm approaching an uncomfortable conversation with Jessica. I start it. It's going worse than I had initially predicted, but can I not avoid? Can I not withdraw? Can I not eject? Can I focus on my breath? And can I remain in
mhm.
the fire? Um, can be learned through a
Yeah,
yoga practice. And it's
absolutely.
probably harder in your relationships, especially with the person who you care for the most. Um, but yeah, I love it as a practice. And it kind of as a segue here, that's really what the feminine desires is an ability to stand in the fire, to not fold, to not crumple, to have a spine and have the courage
Mhm,
to lead the relationship into those places that are hard. But if processed effectively, you can
mhm,
always emerge from the other side with more intimacy. So one of the ways to get men interested in this work is their relationships to the feminine. The most
mhm.
superficial desire is I want to get laid more often. The
Sure.
kind of more evolved desire is I want to have better relationships with women.
Mhm.
So what is it that is required of a man to be able to create safety and to be able to create a person that the right woman is gonna desire?
Oh man, don't ask the small ones, huh? Ah, So I think there's a redefinition of strength that has to happen, right? Like I think we have to as men, we have to redefine how we see strength and how we define strength within ourselves. Um, and I think that there has to be a trust that women aren't just saying like, no, I want a strong but vulnerable male. Because the biggest fear we have as men typically, and I'm speaking for all men because I am one, um, is that that we're going to show that vulnerability, and you're not going to think it's sexy,
Hmm.
right? Brené Brown tells this amazing story about being at a book signing where this woman comes up. She's got 4 books, one for herself and one for her 3 daughters. And she gets the book signed. Thank you. And she moves off to the side. She's talking with this guy. And there's obviously, it's probably her husband. And they're kind of in a bit of an argument over something. And she's trying to stop him from what looks like going over to the table to speak to Brene. And the guy cuts the line, comes right up and says, "Hey, I noticed that you don't write anything about men." She goes, "No, I don't. I write about women." And he goes, "Well, that's convenient for you, isn't it?" And she's like, "I beg your pardon." He says, "Yeah." He said, "Because you know what? I read your book and I appreciate all the conversations about shame and women stuff, but you don't talk about anything regarding vulnerability in men. And I've got 4 women in my house that would just as soon watch me die upon my white horse than watch me fall off." Yeah. That'll fuck you up. Right. So as a culture, we have to confront how we see strength.
Mhm.
And that ties in enoughness and all of that. So like not being addicted to those goals and becoming, concerned with purpose. Is that going to be okay? How are we going to define strength for ourselves as men? Um, for me, I've had to wrestle that one in myself and become an amalgamation of a part of me that is a knuckle dragging ape that can be dangerous when I need to be, um,
Mhm.
but is also never going to let that part of me that was forged in the fires of my trauma visit anywhere near any of my kids or my wife. And the strength I exhibit with them is my ability to love them deeply and to be vulnerable. And every time an animal dies on the screen in a movie or, there's a touching moment, my 2 boys turn and go to see what's the appropriate response here. And it's always eyes shrink wrapped in tears.
As you're talking, the image that I'm seeing of this new idea of strength is like, okay, well, it is desired that there can be some strength that we have been taught, physical strength or protector energy, however people want to define that for themselves. But if you're carrying this bag of rocks because you're
Mm-hmm.
afraid that anyone sees it, then when you have to, lift something to protect someone, you really can't because 80% of your strength is like
Mm-hmm.
behind you carrying this bag of rocks. And so it's not necessarily even, oh, you're not strong for having emotions. It's like you're utilizing all of the strength you do have, burying
Mm-hmm.
them.
Yeah.
And if you're not using all of that strength burying them, it really can go in another direction.
Mm-hmm.
And just having this idea of like, where am I actually allocating my life force? Is it towards a direction of creation and things I want to build? Or is it in suppression so that no one knows I'm a human with emotions? Uh,
Yeah. That's interesting. It just hit me because it's like, as long as I'm outsourcing my self worth and I'm asking you or anyone else to tell me I'm okay, I can't find that. I don't put that bag of rocks down.
mhm,
But when I stand in who I understand myself to be, and I go, guess what? This is who I am.
mhm,
I'm a emotionally connected man who finds strength in emotionality and strength in being vulnerable and connected to my wife. I don't give a shit about who won the fucking game. I'm smart enough to understand it. I'm just not dumb enough to think it's important. And by
mhm.
the way, how's your marriage, Barry? You know, tell me about that. Tell me about something that matters. So small talk is, something have a hard time with. I'm often the fart in the elevator with um, most social interactions with regard to that because I kind of want to know what takes you to depth,
Mhm.
and I don't make any apologies for that anymore.
Yeah, the other thing that was coming to mind is just, um, in partnerships specifically, we're not only connecting through attraction. And We had a conversation recently, which he's like so emotionally intelligent, and
Mhm.
so it's just
Mhm.
interesting to watch the conversations that we have versus conversations I've had with other people. And still, the programming of men can't be vulnerable or have emotion
Mhm.
comes through occasionally. That is like we get to unwind together. And he said
Mhm.
something recently of just like, yeah, but if I share this thing, then you're not going to be like attracted to me. And I'm like, I'm not worrying about being attracted to you when you're sad. Like, that's like not it's not the wheelhouse of our relationship that we're in that
Right.
moment, which is like really important. It's like
It's
we
a
have
great
so
distinction.
yeah, like, we have
Yeah.
so much sexual chemistry, that's what we're doing when we're doing that, and also, like, probably most of the day, but in this
Mhm.
particular moment,
Yeah.
when, like, you're having an
Mhm.
emotional process, we just
Mhm.
get to be connecting from our heart space,
Mhm.
which is, like, not the polarity game,
Mhm.
that's the heart
Mhm.
space game,
Mhm.
and that feels really important, like, it's possible for someone to see your emotions and hold them and feel more connected to you afterwards, and then when that's cleared, you can go back to playing the polarity game and you're even more connected in your relationship. So there actually is more attraction. But in
Mhm.
that moment where like something sacred and something soft and tender needs to be held,
Mhm.
that's what you're doing. You don't have to be worried about the other stuff, which feels really important.
Mhm.
No, I think it's a great distinction, but I do think that does dovetail into that fear that if I show
Mhm,
this, I'm going to brave this. You've said that, and I've had this happen
mhm,
where men will be in the room like, but she said it would be okay, and
mhm,
Yeah.
I fell apart, and she's like, mm,
mhm.
Yeah.
mm,
Totally.
Yeah. I think there's something asked of women there, right? To understand that, when I feel shame, it's not really a spiral at this point.
mhm,
It's like I feel the
mhm,
healthy shame, I need to feel it, and then I'm out of it,
mhm,
right? Jessica's had experiences with others where that wasn't the thing. And so she'll think that I'm continuing to experience this shame spiral. I'm like, no, like really, really I'm good, and
mhm.
really and I need you to give me the permission to be over my shame, like I don't really need to talk about it
Yeah,
anymore,
good.
right?
Mhm,
But women allowing men to change, the masculine is stable and unchanging, but allowing the masculine to change, like if he shows his emotions and it's not sexy in the moment, it's like don't believe that he'll never be sexy again. So I think there's an ask of women to create more space, and with men there is skill to being vulnerable. And you and I talked about men overcorrecting either way. So most men overcorrect to I'm just never going to be vulnerable. I'm going to suppress, suppress, suppress.
mhm,
They
mhm,
really they only see a lot of these men only see the only other alternative is I'm gonna be a waterworks show and sob
mhm,
boo-hoo her
mhm,
shoulder, and
mhm,
I just don't know what's wrong, like, I just don't know, right? And that is destabilizing for a
Sure.
woman. So developing some emotional skills to not just dump your emotional process at her feet, but to have some understanding of it ahead of time, I think builds trust. Where dumping it at her feet can really break trust. This guy has no skill of processing, holding his own emotions, and now it's 100% my job, as opposed to I'm getting support. I understand that I'm sad. I think that I'm sad because of this thing, and I think this is what I might need from you or need from
Mhm,
me to feel a
mhm.
little bit better. So, how do you relate to that phrase of being skilled at being vulnerable?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I think there's a different ask going on when someone's flooding out constantly like that. And
Mm,
typically the ask is, "Can you fix me? Can you
mm,
Mhm,
can you hold this for me and do this work for me?" And so I will often try to help them regulate their nervous system through practice, through therapy, through consciousness, and like having a daily check in with oneself to ask yourself, what part of me is showing up here? Right? Because if I'm always showing up in the flooded out, wounded child part and I want you to be my mommy, guess what? That's not sexy. Right? Because I will have women who will be like, I don't want to fuck that. I don't.
mhm,
And I'm like, you shouldn't because it's weird. Yeah. And it's time for you to look at how you're showing up and kind of like go and take responsibility for the parts of you um, that are coming to the table. and to perhaps not off gas all of that onto her, to do some of that work yourself or with a professional. Because if there's that much, then you obviously need some containment, and you need someone to help you find that containment. And very often it is within that there's a part of you that does need to flood out. It's just a part of you that needs to experience that, but you shouldn't be painting this person with that all of the time. That's not fair and it's not healthy. So, really looking at like, there is a part of me that that I need to go into from time to time. And there's a part of me that I need to integrate. And perhaps this work is best not done here with my partner, but done with myself and with a skilled professional. If it's that, over the
Totally.
top. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. A support system of one is not a system.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Asking your partner to do all of that is not healthy. So
Right.
having somebody like a professional, a therapist,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
a really safe person, even,
Mm-hmm.
there's a
Sure.
lot of instruction of, like a friend or a family member. It really needs to be a specific type of person who's not making it about them at all, knows how to hold space. So professionals
Mm-hmm.
are great, but yeah, a support system of one is not a system.
And there's it's a small point, but an important one. Talking about my experience with my partner, like I'd probably visit conversations about my stuff every day. Ashley does with me, hers every day, but I'm talking about it,
Mm.
not through it. Right. And so through it is like, oh my God, and I'm painting you with fix me, fix me, fix me. That's not what we want to do. I'm talking about as if it's sitting next to me. I'm taking responsibility for it. Rather than having some expectation of her somehow therapizing me or fixing me, even though she's an incredibly skilled clinician. It's not her place. So yeah, talking about it, I think is great. Talking about your experience, and I love processing with her and talking about my process, but not necessarily asking her to therapize me. Yeah.
Mhm. Men's groups actually seem like a good place to learn that because
Mhm.
usually in like a men's group circle or gathering that's
Yeah.
made for this kind of support,
Hmm.
you might have like one-on-one conversations of problem solving and support, but it starts often with just I'm going to share about my experience. I'm going to tell you what I'm going through, and it's not designed for this back and forth. And, besides the extra benefit that you get to have support from other men and be heard
Hmm.
by other men,
Hmm.
a lot of our the way that we approach relationships from communication and problem solving and emotions is just learned,
Yep.
and so you really have to be in other environments to learn something different. Like we were talking about with practicing, you have to
Hmm.
practice something new.
Hmm.
And friendships or like men's circles are a little bit less charged than my relationship in the moment when I'm
Yep.
having an issue. Like, you're not gonna learn how to solve your pattern in the moment where you're having a thing in the partnership. It really needs
Hmm.
to be, like, practiced elsewhere, and then you can
Sure.
hopefully be successful or more successful than you were previously in the moment. So yeah, the system feels essential, and the men's group, I think, is, like, a less charged space for that. Um
Fortunately, in my experience, there are far too few of those groups out there.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah, and to your point earlier about, the sort of retreat experience you were talking about, there's also, like, you were saying you have to find a specific type of support, like, not all men's groups, not all partnerships, not all
Hmm.
therapists are created equal.
Hmm.
Like, it has to be really one that resonates. It has to be ones that makes you
That's
feel safe, and it also should be a space where you feel like not the most intelligent person in the room necessarily, or not the best or most
right.
healed person in the room. Like, there really should be this energy of, like, being called forward.
Mhm,
So
mhm,
yeah, not enough groups, and hopefully that's changing.
Yeah, we talked about the redefinition of strength, and I think men's groups are incredible for that. If you're a man new to this work and you go to a men's group and there's a man who you see as strong and mature and you witness him being vulnerable,
mhm,
that can be a total paradigm shift. And it's like, I still think that guy's strong and he just shared something really hard. Huh, those two things can go together.
Mhm.
Yep. Yeah, that example, I see that happening for a lot of men in AA, finding a good Alcoholics Anonymous group. I see that connection happening for a lot of men, and that I think that group, has its ups and downs for sure. But just merely mentioning that gives you the sense of like there are just not enough groups out there that speak to that.
So we have two questions at the end of every podcast that we ask our guests.
Okay.
One is that we really preach that, you can't just listen to this information, you have to do something with it. And
Mm-hmm.
so either based on our conversation or based on your experiences, what would be one practice or one piece of self-work that you would give our listeners to start focusing on to create some change?
To your point, I always say this to my clients. I say, listen, the things I say are going to be awesome. Trust me. There's going to be amazing pearls of wisdom that are going to be coming forth from my mouth. And all of it will pale in comparison to anything you do outside of therapy. All of it. None of it will matter compared to what you do. So the practice of that, and there's a million of them. The one I'm sort of gravitating towards right now is like constructing the version of yourself that would have that, whatever that is. Like when you project yourself into the future and if you could cobble together the idea of yourself that would show up in a good relationship as an example, who would he be? What would he be doing? How would he talk? Like, start from there. Start looking at that because it's like we're planning this trip, but we have no destination. This gives us that sense of like, and it can change, but like, who would you be? Like, what part of you and what parts of you exist right now that sort of fulfill that? And that's often enlightening. What parts of me do I have to kind of go, hey, let's take a step back, right? Mm-hmm. And so this amalgamation of so much of perhaps people we know, things we've experienced, parts that already exist, parts that don't exist, we put this together and we start focusing on who am I? How do I show up in that space when I'm having a really connected, loving relationship with my partner, as an example, and start working from there. It's a good practice.
Yeah, it's similar to this teaching act as if. One of the
Yeah.
things we share is like life is really a math equation. Like we can make it as complicated or as simple as we want, but you're getting the results or the output based on your input. And
Mm-hmm.
if you want a different output, you must be putting in something different. And you have to do that first. You can't just you're not going to wake up one day and have a different output.
No.
So yeah, this is a really great practice. I love this.
Yeah, and what are you doing today that version of you does not do?
Mm-hmm.
Can you just
That's
remove
exactly right.
those things? Because removal is often easier. You can do it in no time at all than it is to add on or build a practice of something.
That's right.
And our last question, part of our mission with this podcast is to make it abundantly clear where the good men are to win back some market share from the macho men or the guys who refuse to take up any space at all. So who's another man that our audience can look to or learn from?
Yeah. So there's a book that I love and I've been offering to people. It's John O'Donoghue's book. It's called Anam, if you're familiar. Yeah.
You told me about it on our first call and I just arrived in the mail. So I've read the first few pages.
Yeah. First of all, the writing is, you're like, you know what? Save some for the rest of us, John. So good. But it blends Celtic wisdom with sort of spirituality. But I would point people towards that book's. It's called Anam, which is Soul Friend, and in it he talks about being friends with people and having it like, do you have a soul friend? But what he's loosely also sort of alluding to is becoming the soul friend to yourself, right? And getting in contact with, it's such a soulful book. Like you almost put aside the idea that he's talking about there's this external friend who is a soul friend. He's loosely touching onto that. It's this other thing of like of becoming the soul friend to yourself. And so I think a lot of what he talks about and the way he talks about it is he's really emblematic of what it is to be a really soulful, in touch man, even though he's no longer with us. His writing is still with us.
Awesome. Thanks for the recommendation, Lair, and thanks for joining us for this conversation.
So glad to be here. It's good to see you guys. All right.
If you've taken anything from this podcast, learned anything, make sure to share it with a friend and leave a review. It helps our message reach more people who need it, and it also helps us invite on wise integrated guests for you to learn more from.